Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Rankings Podcast. Jeff Erickson here from RotoWire.com, and my special guest today is Theo Gremminger from Fantasy Points. You can find him at and let me get this right here because I look it up and then I always kind of space a little bit there on the actual Twitter handle, but it's the OG Fantasy. You can follow him on there, Theo. Really appreciate it. We do this like once a year. I always like
Yeah.
to meet you on XM every once in a while as well. How's your season going?
Season's going well. Last week I had a couple of disappointments. Jameer Gibbs week didn't go well. George Pickens, obviously. I had one FFPC main event team that did very well in the regular season, sort of crapped out. But I have a couple of teams that are hanging around, and we'll see how it goes. But last week was wild because you had a bunch of teams that sort of had Trevor Lawrence or had Kyle Pitts or had Trey McBride. Those teams are sort of in the driver's seat, but yeah, it's going pretty well. I've got dynasty playoffs in FFPC, a bunch of sort of big sweats that are coming up.
Yep.
That's a 2-week variety for all of those. So I'm hanging in there. Got a couple of underdog teams left too. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Awesome. I love hearing that there. I saw you and I both have an iron in the fire in the primetime contest in the NFFC. You got a Gibbs team there. I saw that. I was looking up your roster. The one player we share in common is Jalen Hurts. So we'll send good vibes his way for this week. I am one of the aforementioned Kyle Pitts team. So last week was very, very good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, unbelievable. I mean, the edge you got not only with Pitts, but the fact that you had it on a Thursday, it's like the psychological edge of the Bijan Robinson manager and the Kyle Pitts manager. It's like if you don't play fantasy football, you don't understand. Those Thursday night spikes can like completely ruin your week. A lot of these redraft managers had to stare that in the face heading into Sunday's games for like 2.5 days. It's incredibly tilting.
Yeah, because you know what? This is it's a construct, but we get in this mind of, oh, I better find ways to make up when I'm setting my roster for the rest of the weekend there. And it leads to making more roster errors. It's really funny. I've seen that happen before.
Yeah, there's an old saying that nobody ever makes good decisions at 12:30 p.m. on a Sunday on the East Coast. Right. You're better off with your start-sit decisions, being well thought out. Probably set them Saturday, set it and forget it unless there's an injury. But yeah, the mind does like you start chasing spike weeks. You start chasing like thread the needle type outcomes. It's completely like nothing else in your life. Fantasy football when you're staring at like a 50-0 type margin heading into Sundays. It's wild.
Absolutely. And even worse is when your player tanks on a Thursday. That's the nut low. Because then you've already wasted a roster spot. You're locked in that spot there. You can't improve it. Like, oh, I have to live with this mistake. Oh, how can I overcome it there? It's such a psychological mind bender there. And it happens all the time.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild the things that we do, especially this time of year.
Absolutely. And that's why we love it though, too. And then we get our obscure playoff heroes like Drew Bennett and Billy Volek, or, those sort of guys. We all have them. We all have that one guy that has lifted us or beaten us that, and usually I think I remember the obscure guys that lift us and the big names that beat me. I'll never forget Drew Brees going back into a Monday night game to set the record for like touchdowns in a season because they wanted to do it at home instead of on the road in the final week of the season. It's like that. I lost by less than a point in that one there too.
Yeah, it's wild. I think back to the one that's recent, not really a random name at all, a player that everybody knows, but that Amari Cooper spike week that literally won best ball leagues. It was the semifinals. And Cooper put up that insane performance that knocked everybody out of all these best ball leagues. That was like 2 years ago. That one sort of resonates. I mean, there's so many of these ones. And that's a great thing about fantasy is you can remember the guy who had the random spike week that beat you probably more than any important win. And not just in the fantasy playoffs. I still will mention it about once a year. There was that random Thursday night, or maybe it was a Monday night, Robert Tonyan game where he had like 3 or 4 touchdown catches. I remember losing a big spot with that one where you go from like a 99% favorite to actually losing the game because some random guy goes off. I mean, it's sort of the nature of the beast. It's incredible pain in fantasy football. And this week sort of sets up for that. You've got a lot of sort of random players. You've got a lot of difficult matchups. And then this time of year, we also factor in weather, which is another like variable that it's impossible for us to cap when we're drafting our teams back in August.
Mhm. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the forum, and hey, keep firing them there. We'll tackle most of them at the end. If there is quarterback, like if it's a position specific one, we're at the end of that position. We might hit a couple of those then. There, so keep firing away. Just and we'll answer your question in time. Just we're having a conversation here, so we're not going to stop the conversation just to answer your question, but we will get to your question. I promise you. As far as that one goes, let's talk quarterbacks here, Theo. First of all, let's talk a little bit about Jacoby Brissett, because it's been it may not have been a good ride for the Arizona Cardinals, but it's been a great ride for the Arizona Cardinals offense, especially if you have Trey McBride, if you have Michael Wilson, or the couple of weeks where Marvin Harrison Jr. has been healthy through the stretch. Against the Atlanta Falcons, I'm low-key really looking forward to this game. I think this might be one of the better fantasy matchups of the week.
Yeah, you've got Arizona as a home dog, which I was a little bit surprised when that line came out. Vegas is easily favoring Atlanta in that one. Arizona's secondary has been so bad. People have been putting up huge numbers against them. And then you've got Jacoby Brissett. The pass volume's been incredible. And even in games where they get behind significantly, he's able to eat in garbage time. Jacoby Brissett had the most fantasy points scored of any quarterback this season against the Houston Texans, like lights out defense last week. And Brissett's finished as a QB1 every single week of the season. It's been unbelievable. He's one of the biggest waiver wire additions of the year. And if you play Superflex, he's the biggest waiver wire addition of the year. Yep. Brissett's been incredible. I think he's like a top 5 quarterback this week easily in that matchup.
I've got him at number 3.
Yeah,
the only 2 quarterbacks I have ahead of him are Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. So
I think Hurts is interesting this week. You mentioned him earlier. I think Hurts should be up there. I think Jared Goff's interesting. But Burrow, absolutely, he's locked in. Brissett's somewhere in that mix. So you're talking about guys who are established franchise signal callers that we knew we'd be starting at the beginning of the year. Jared Goff, who's in one of the best offenses in the NFL. And then you've got Jacoby Brissett, who's never done anything until this year. So it's really one of the wildest storylines. I had this conversation on the podcast I do with Scott Barrett, the School of Scott, where we said one of the most impactful sort of sliding doors moments in fantasy this season was when Kyler Murray went down. We saw Jacoby Brissett step in. Then they announced Kyler Murray done for the year. Those sort of things. It unlocked Trey McBride, who's one of the biggest positional edge advantages we've ever seen in fantasy football, and certainly the biggest positional edge at the tight end position in maybe forever. It's also unlocked the Michael Wilson hysteria. It's incredible stuff.
Michael Wilson got me into the NFFC primetime playoffs. If without that pickup, I don't make it. I finished 3rd in my league I finished out of 2nd by 2 points, and I finished out of 4th by like 2 more points. So I was right in the middle there. If I don't pick up Michael Wilson, I don't make the playoffs. Now, countless other mistakes were there, or I could have done better, or countless other things where I could have fallen behind, But at the same time, it's like, thank you, Michael Wilson. I have him in a lot of key places. Scott Fishbowl, I drafted him. And so that was nice when I got that bump as well. So really interesting to see what Arizona is doing. I love the over in this game. 47.5 is the total. I think it should be in the 50s. I think this is going to be a track meet because I don't see Arizona stopping Atlanta either.
Yeah, I agree with you. You also have Drake London returning to practice today. Yep. So we've kept sort of a candle burning for London. There was a lot of people saying they'd shut him down for the year. That ship has sailed. Looks like he might be back this week. And I think if he's not back this week, then he's going to be back against the Rams in week 17. So that's an interesting one because Pitts has been on such a heater, not just last week, but he scored 15 points or more now in PPR for 3 consecutive weeks. He's been a top 5 tight end for 3 consecutive weeks. You've got to think that against that unbelievably bad defense, Kirk Cousins can support both of them, but it certainly lowers the ceiling case for Kyle Pitts to have London back in the lineup. Bijan's just so locked in right now. I agree with you. We're really hoping that this is like the random game that you're chasing in redraft, you're chasing in DFS, and it just tilts over. How about a 60-point total in that one? We'd love to see it.
Let's go. Let's go. That's what I want as well. I've got Cousins, by the way, at 15. in my rankings this week. It's a little, he hasn't really had a big game outside of Tampa. In fact, his best 3 games as a Falcon have all been against Todd Bowles. I think that's hilarious.
It's wild. It's wild. And it's over the last two years. He's just owned the Bucks. And a high percentage of his fantasy points over a 2-year period have come against Tampa Bay. It's wild. He owns them. Tampa Bay should just sign him next year to be the backup quarterback to Baker Mayfield so they avoid having to see him.
Tying a bow on the Brissett conversation, had a question in there, Purdy versus Brissett. I'm going Brissett over Purdy. I've got Purdy at 10. Not bad. I like Purdy this week, but I just think there's a better shootout potential. Indy's defense can be tricky. Lou Anarumo can dial up some schemes. We saw what happened to Sam Darnold last week.
Yeah, it's a champagne problem if you have Purdy and Brissett both on your roster. Over at Fantasy Points, we have Purdy as QB6 overall on the week. He looks really locked in. And Indianapolis, I don't know if they scare me quite as much anymore with Rivers there because their ability to control the ball, to sit on it, and to have long sustained drives is a little less prevalent, even with Jonathan Taylor there. I think San Francisco might put up an absolute number. A lot of times you see these guys take over as starter, have a strong performance in game 1, like we saw with Rivers against Seattle. Strong performance, I should say, for the team. Rivers sort of got him by, and then the floor falls out from under him in the second start. That could be the case. I could see San Francisco winning this game by 2 touchdowns. Purdy is a locked-in mid-level QB1. I know you have him as sort of a low-end QB1, but he's completely locked in. I'm using him in a couple of big spots myself with a lot of confidence, but I would lean towards Brissett just because of the game flow, just because of just how locked in he's been in the pass volume, and it's really a perfect matchup against that Atlanta defense. Both of these teams have losing records. I mean, everything about it is, hey, let's go for it. Let's have an entertaining football game, and let's put some points on the board.
Yep. By the way, I do have Purdy over Stroud. I saw that in the come through as well. Do prefer Purdy as far as that one goes. Another quarterback I want to talk about is Trevor Lawrence, coming off of getting you to the semifinals. He's been on a heater, but last week obviously it was the nut high. Now he goes on the road at Denver. What does he do for an encore after, when it's obviously a much tougher matchup there? Where do you have Trevor Lawrence this week?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm scared of using Trevor Lawrence. Jacksonville is playing really, really high-level football. They just put a huge number up on the Jets. Going into Denver here is usually a situation that you want to avoid. But Lawrence coming off of that massive game, if you've got to use him, I don't think this is like, oh, I'm panicking. And I'm probably not going to use guys like the Marcus Mariotas, the
Agreed.
Tyler Shucks, the guys that are like sort of enticing streamers this week. I'm not going to use them over Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has been on a real tear here. He's been playing incredible fantasy football, the best of his career. Liam Cohen effect is real. Last year, we saw Liam Cohen lead Baker Mayfield to career highs in every category. This year, Trevor Lawrence, career highs in every category. He's up to QB7 on the year. He's also going to set a career high mark in rushing yardage, so he gets a little bit of insulation with the mobility he has as well. So I'm not scared of using Trevor Lawrence, but again, that Denver Broncos defense can affect quarterbacks, especially in Mile High. A lot of pressure on Denver, though, in this one to keep that number 1 seed in the AFC. So Jacksonville 10-4, they're doing things well. And Jacksonville, we do get the really strong Week 17 matchup. But yeah, I think a lot of fantasy managers don't necessarily have a pivot that's more enticing than Trevor Lawrence at this point in the year. Happy to answer them if you throw them in there, guys.
Yep. I'd go Lawrence over Cousins and Baker. I've got Lawrence at 14. In a lot of cases, I'm not going to have a better option. A lot of people have double the quarterbacks there that are above. So, maybe I'm lucky and I have a choice, but in many cases I won't. In a guillotine league, it's a really interesting discussion there. My friend Scott Pianowski and I were talking about that. What do you do if you have the second, basically choice of all but Josh Allen this week? You can go a lot of different ways with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, if I'm chasing a second quarterback this week, I think that the Eagles are going to put a number on Washington this week. I think Jalen Hurts is in a really, really good spot to put up a significant scoring numbers. I think he's going to find the end zone as a runner. I'm looking for this to be a continuing trend of Philadelphia had their losing streak, beat up on Las Vegas. Now I think they put up a big number on Washington with Marcus Mariota there. And then they have that really fun Week 17 game. We're going to hope that like the fantasy football gods don't give us horrific weather for that one, because the way these teams are trending, Philadelphia and Buffalo are both going to need to win. You're going to get a Week 17 environment. You've got Josh Allen. You've got Jalen Hurts. You've got James Cook. You've got Saquon Barkley trending up, A.J. Brown. You've got a lot of fantasy Dallas Goedert for that matter. You've got a lot of fantasy starters and a lot of fantasy managers with skin in the game in Week 17. And we're hoping that that's going to be a high-scoring game in a must-win environment for both teams.
Yeah, they had that shootout 2 years ago. That was super fun.
Oh, that was a good one for sure.
I hope we get that reprised. Sam Darnold. Been about out of sync ever since the second half of the Arizona win when they lost their starting center to an injury. The Rams did a number on him, and last week was ugly. Lou Anarumo had him confused with some of his blitz coverages there. The rematch against the Rams, what are you expecting?
I think he's somewhere in that mid to low end QB2 range this week. I have a kind of a bad feeling about Thursday night's game where we could end up having, like last Thursday, it was everything went well. You had the Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson game. The game was high scoring. This could be a week where there's so much on the line for both of these teams. Both of these teams have very strong defenses. We saw the game flow that happened last time. It was an under environment last time these two teams played. Seattle's got their backs against the wall here. They really need this win to win the division. I have a feeling that it's going to be somewhere like a 21-17 type game, and we're not going to get the sort of game flow we want. So Darnold, I'm using him in a super flex spot, but I certainly would not be wanting to even consider him in any sort of single quarterback format. I'd look to pivot wherever I could. Super flex, your hands are sort of tied, and the low-end QB2s are so sketchy this week that there's not really you're not going to go with Phillip Rivers, Kenny Pickett, Brady Cook are about as bad as it gets for like our final like lowest ranked quarterbacks on the board. So yeah, you're sort of stuck with Darnold in that sort of position.
Indeed. Big Meech asks, Stafford or Burrow?
Stafford or Burrow? I go in Burrow. I'm going Burrow in that one. I think Stafford, again, against the Seattle defense, I'm going to lower my expectations for Matt Stafford, whereas Joe Burrow, I think you should treat him somewhere as a top 5, top 6 quarterback. I know that there's some trepidation, a little bit of fear in the market right now with Burrow after what Baltimore was able to do, but I don't think we'll see that with Miami. Miami just made the switch to Quinn Ewers. That's a big question mark of how that offense is going to look. I think Cincinnati's going to come back strong. We saw what Joe Burrow was able to do in his first 2 games back, the first Baltimore game, the Buffalo game. So he's 2 for 3 in terms of putting up huge fantasy numbers. I think he gets back, makes it 3 for 4, and we're feeling great about Burrow. And Burrow gets that Week 17 game. That's against Arizona. Yeah, so that's the big one for Cincinnati. So
Trey McBride might break the time-space continuum in that game there with the Bengals' ability to cover the tight end or lack thereof.
Yeah, Trey McBride is going to put up whatever he wants against that defense. It's the worst defense we've ever seen against a tight end position. And I've talked to a number of people that do this, like analytically driven. There's nothing to compare. So many tight ends are putting up tight end 1 weeks. So many tight ends have their best week of the season against this defense. And now you've got like a perfect storm where Trey McBride's having one of the best fantasies. He'd be wide receiver 4 right now, which is exceptionally high for a tight end. And he gets to go up against that defense. I mean, you could be a 35, 40-point game there.
Could be a monster shootout game. I'm hoping for it there. Master JS, Stroud or Lamar? Lamar sat out practice today with the flu, by the way.
I mean, Stroud's been playing well. I think they're super close this week. I would probably lean with Stroud because they're going up against Vegas, and that's a team that we'd expect them to handle. And Lamar against New England's an interesting one. Do we get the game flow that we want there? Again, it's splitting hairs. I think they're both somewhere in that low-end QB1 range. But I will lean towards Stroud because of the difficulty of the opponent.
All right, very good. Well, thanks for the quarterback questions. We're going to keep hitting all sorts of questions here. Appreciate you guys for chiming in with all these questions. We're going to do a bunch more later on in the show. But first, before we go to running backs, we got a quick note from our sponsors over at Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big you can win up to $5,000 extra money this football season. Starting with Dabble is easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. Jeff Erickson here. I'm with Theo Gremminger. You can catch his work over at Fantasy Points. And I know you have a number of different podcasts you do, Theo. Why don't you tell everybody where and when you can find them?
Yeah, so if you're watching this on YouTube over at RotoWire, you can just go over to the Fantasy Points channel, subscribe there. We're dropping a lot of video content this season. I record Fantasy Football Daily. That's the show that I'm recording most often. I do a solo pod there. I have a pod with guests. And then I drop a waiver wire pod with Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley every week. My start sit with Graham Barfield, that drops every single week. So similar to what you're doing, taking these start sit decisions, talking about edge flex picks and all that. I do School of Scott with Scott Barrett once a week. You can find that on the School of Scott podcast feed and over at Fantasy Points YouTube. Dynasty Life is my Dynasty show. I've done that for several years, even before I was at Fantasy Points. I brought that over with me from my old spot. And then the podcast I just started up, if you're a Dynasty manager or if you're a fan of the NFL draft, if you do early best balls, early redraft stuff, I started out the 2026 NFL Draft podcast with Brett Whitefield. Brett Whitefield's one of like the true ball knowers out there in terms of evaluating NFL talent. His track record is sort of next to none. I bring over the fantasy angle, and we're evaluating all of the prospects in the 2026 class, NFL team needs, early ADP, some dynasty values. We're going to be at the Senior Bowl. We're going to be at the Combine. We're sort of covering everything up until the NFL draft. So if you're a fan of the NFL draft, never too early. Let's get it started. It really could be a potentially fun one for fantasy football this year too.
Yeah, I can't wait to check that out. I've been consuming more like early draft content than I have ever had. So yeah, because I'm playing more Dynasty than I used to. So that kind of goes hand in hand. You don't want to be catching up in May when your draft's about to start.
It's super addictive, and it's one of the most fun things that we have for the off season. Just sort of like where do the tea leaves fall. You've got this year where it's going to be way easier to consume because they made the first round shorter. There's less time between each pick, which I think is going to be really NFL fan friendly. You don't have to sit there all night. It's gonna shorten the NFL draft on that opening night by like an hour and a half. So we're looking forward to that. Also because we stream the entire thing and I cover the entire day one and day two. By the end of day two, I'm like a zombie. So Getting me an extra hour, I'm all about that life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's nothing more than, I play softball on Thursday night. So I always like start the watch of the draft. And then the second half, I'm in the car driving over because it's like an hour away or whatever. But it's just like, I get to consume the whole first round of the draft. That makes me very happy. Let's talk running backs. Josh Jacobs missed practice today. Had a really nice game against the Broncos last week, including a wide receiver quality catch for a touchdown. What are you doing with him against the Bears this week?
I mean, Josh Jacobs is literally a Terminator. The guy never misses games for Green Bay. He's got 30 touchdowns in 30 games as a Green Bay Packer. He's going to end up potentially with the second most touchdowns all time by a Green Bay Packer in 2 years. It's wild. So am I worried about Josh Jacobs missing a practice on a Wednesday? I honestly don't care about it. I think he's one of the players that's going to play through whatever he can. Also, you have the mental issues here with Green Bay where Micah Parsons' injury, I think they're going to play with a great deal of effort and enthusiasm. A lot of times when you see an NFL team lose a big name, the next game they really, really bring it. Then you factor in they're going up against a rival team from their conference, their division, the Bears. I'd be surprised if Jacobs doesn't play just based on the track record. The only game that we didn't have him was the Emmanuel Wilson game, and then Jacobs comes back in a major, major way right after. So I'll start worrying a little bit later in the week than I would right now. I think Jacobs ends up playing through it because that's been what his MO. He's got a ton of toughness. Hardly misses games, and he's been on a really sensational run as a Packer.
Absolutely agree. And just look at like the evolution last week there. Missed practice, limited practice, no problem. 2 touchdowns. Yep. Against Denver, no less. I think that's the other thing too. And I know the Bears aren't as bad as they were earlier in the season in terms of run defense, but come on. It's still not a really super stout run defense there. I definitely want to go ahead and start Jacobs if I have him there. Just more want to get him into the conversation. Travion Henderson, huge game for us if you had him going. I just don't trust the volume on him, but at the same time, he's got that big play explosive ability. Where does he rank for you this week?
I mean, I think you could have him anywhere in that low end RB1 up to the high end RB2 range. Yeah, there's issues with the volume, but he still had 16 touches. Ramondre Stevenson had 9 of them. And Henderson, it's the big playability that we saw at Ohio State has completely translated. And I love the fact that Henderson led the team in touches. And the 2 touchdowns are unbelievable. All the fantasy points are unbelievable. But leading the RB room in touches by a clear margin coming out of the bye week is significant. I think it continues. There's a chance that Travion Henderson might be the one that you need to win your fantasy playoffs. I think that he looks that good. And I think this is going to be a trend with Henderson. Henderson, I think, finishes the year on an absolute heater. This week against Baltimore, it's the big game, big magnitude of a Sunday night game in Baltimore, a lot on the line for both teams. New England has a chance here that if Denver loses to Jacksonville, New England can move themselves right back into the conversation for that 1 seed, even coming off of that Buffalo loss. Then you factor in, it doesn't get better for us in fantasy. Travion Henderson and the Patriots against the Jets in week 17. The Jets are completely, basically hanging it up. And Mike Vrabel, this is a coach that is willing to put his foot on the opponent's throat and really, really run it up. You can just see Vrabel, if he has an opportunity to win 42-10 against the Jets in week 17, he's going to go ahead and do that. So Travion Henderson could end up averaging 25 points or more in the fantasy playoffs. And I think it's going to continue where I think he's going to have a strong NFL playoffs. And you know how this thing works. When you have a young player who ends the season on a really high note, it's the recency bias for us. There's a chance that Travion Henderson is a first-round pick in PPR redraft leagues next year, heading into year 2. He's on that like Jahmyr Gibbs-like trajectory.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, there's some the funny thing about Henderson, the knock against him as a pro was his blitz pickup on a couple of different instances. And the funny thing is, of all the running backs coming into this past year's draft class, he was considered to be the best at that. You know,
I think for me, I feel like it's Vrabel has this like way of never complimenting rookies and sort of nitpicking them. I think it's psychological. He played for Bill Belichick. We can only imagine some of the things Bill Belichick said to motivate young players behind closed doors, especially back in the day when coaches were not quite as positive and not as player friendly. So I think that's just in his nature to sort of ride the rookies, not give them any compliments. I do think that he's a veterans deference guy, and I think that he wants to lean into giving veterans the opportunity. That's why we saw Mondre so much at the beginning of the year. But once you sort of opened up the box of Travion Henderson and those big playability, it's impossible to put it away. And it's to the point that he's the scariest Patriots offensive skill position player by a fairly wide margin for the rest of the season heading into the NFL playoffs. So, yeah, I'm all about Henderson. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agree on that one there. And yeah, he's been very important for me in a couple of leagues there. So yeah, hopefully that keeps on going this week. Let's move on. Talk a little Quinshon Judkins. It's really ugly in Cleveland right now with that offensive line. They somehow found a way to get even more injured against the Bears. And yet we've seen a number of running backs have big runs against Buffalo, their opponent this week. I'm finding it hard to bench Judkins, even though recent results haven't been great.
I'm with you. I'm using Judkins in a few spots. I think you treat him as a mid-level RB2. The Bills have just been horrific against opposing running backs. I think a lot of it was kind of by design, that they designed this defense, maybe 2 years ago, where they decided to sort of be a run funnel defense. Going up against Patrick Mahomes in the NFL playoffs, they need to stop the pass. And it's just sort of spiraled out of control to the point that they're like a bottom 5 run defense right now. So I'm trusting the fact that I think Cleveland will give Quinshon Judkins the volume that's necessary for him to hit RB2 numbers. And maybe he falls in the end zone. Maybe he rips off a long run here. Love the talent. I don't necessarily trust Cleveland by any means, but they are at home and they do have this matchup against a defense that's been very porous against the run. So I get it. I'm probably using him in most spots. We have one. I shout out to Dan Williamson, who I split a team in the NFFC primetime with, and a couple other high stakes teams with. He is a co-host of Fantasy Empire with Chris Vaccaro and Nelson Sousa and Matt Modica. Really, really sharp high stakes guy, Dan Williamson. We had a Judkins versus Omarion Hampton decision last week. We have a really running back heavy team, and when we drafted, Judkins was like a 14th rounder. So Judkins we benched last week. This week it's going to be a discussion whether we put him in the lineup. So I sort of don't mind him this week. Again, I think there's a limited ceiling because of the quality of the offense. But if you need running back 2 utility, he's that.
Agreed. And so I've got a Henderson Judkins team there, and just hoping these rookies come on through for me there. Question about from one of our listeners asking about Judkins here. It's broader question because it's a flex spot. Judkins versus Abuka, McLaurin, or Tet. Tetero and McMillan didn't practice today. Are any of these 3 startable over Judkins? A half point PPR.
A half point PPR, I'm probably going to lean with Judkins there. Yeah. I think I just take the volume and run with it. There's been some historical favorable things with Terry McLaurin and when Mariota starts. So if you want to chase it, McLaurin would be the one I would go with. And I think you could put a little context to this. A lot of times you get these start-sit decisions, and big shout out to the chat. Your chat is lit with these start-sit decisions. Yeah. A lot of times the context should be, I'm an underdog or I'm a favorite. If I'm an underdog, a significant underdog, then I'm chasing it with McLaurin here. I'm going to roll the dice that he can get loose behind the secondary of Philadelphia. If I'm a favorite, I'm going with Quinshon Judkins here.
Yeah. And by the way, if we haven't gotten your question answered, we're not stopping answering questions, but we're trying to have a conversation here too. So, just we're peppering in a few questions here and there. If we haven't got to it, we'll get to you. For instance, we don't know if Rashid Rice is going to play. He sat out today. He's in the concussion protocol. If I had to guess, I'd say no, because it's the first day of the concussion protocol, but I don't know. We'll wait. We have to wait and see on that one there. Friday will tell us the answer on that one there. But so be patient, please. If you post a question we haven't got to it, we will. We're going to do our best to get to as many as we possibly can. Talking with Theo Gremminger here from Fantasy Points. I got one more running back I want to talk to you about here, Theo, and that's Blake Corum. The last 3 weeks, he's been the RB4. Not just like an RB4, the RB4. He's been awesome for us lately. It's hard to start him because he's splitting carries. It's hard to start him against Seattle. What are you doing with Blake Corum this week?
I mean, I got caught last week. I was on a podcast and they asked me what I should do with Blake Corum, and I said the same thing, that I would sit him. I would be cautious about it because of the presence of Kyren Williams, but the guy's been playing so well. Then you factor in, does LA become more running back centric after the Devontae Adams injury? So there's a couple of factors there, but I'll sort of repeat what I said last week. It's difficult to chase it with Corum. I think he's probably somewhere in the RB3 range this week against that difficult Seattle defense. So I'm looking to sort of start players that I think have a little bit more upside. But I think the conversation needs to go to this offseason, is Blake Corum better than Kyren Williams? And I think that could be a conversation in terms of like the big play ability. I think Corum's there. And do we see this become sort of an interesting conversation during the summertime, where I think there's a chance that Corum's ADP shoots up, Williams stays into like a decent range, and I think that becomes a conversation throughout the summer. It's not Sean McVay's MO, and I know they paid Kyren Williams, but Corum is really, really impressive recently.
He is. I just fear what happens to Corum with a workload increase. Like if he's asked to do those between the tackle runs a little bit more often, takes the pounding short. We've seen Corum not be as good in short yardage situations. Remember the first Seahawks game? They went 3 times in a row at the goal line, had to bring Williams in for 4th down. Williams converted it. Williams does have an aptitude for short yardage situations. I've noticed that. He's also carried a pretty heavy workload. I know the knock on Williams was durability coming out of Notre Dame, and is the funny thing. And yet he's had a heavy workload under McVay. sometimes we see that everybody's favorite running back is the second running back. He's got, he's fresher. He comes in hitters counts. He hits some big plays. I wonder sometimes what happens when they get handed the reins. I say that, but also Jahmyr Gibbs was that guy at one point in time too. And that he seems to be handling the workload just fine. Devon Achane too.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the Kyren Williams, the knock on him coming in was the durability and also the size. Can he hold up? Mm-hmm. I think he's punched above his weight class in multiple years at the NFL level now, and also has been able to sustain more volume than we ever expected from him. His MO coming out of Notre Dame is what a good pass catcher he's going to be at the NFL level, potentially a third down back. But I don't know. I mean, it could end up being borrowed time, and eventually the volume catches up with you for most backs. Now, certain backs like Josh Jacobs can do it forever, but a guy like Kyren Williams, we've already gotten all this utility out of him. Maybe next year's the year that another back breaks through here. Yep. So if you're a dynasty manager, I think investing in Blake Corum, even while the value has moved up, he's already shown you that he can play. He's already shown you that he's an incredibly high-end handcuff asset. Then now you get the potential that the role grows in 2026.
Indeed. And a funny thing is when they drafted Jarquez Hunter, I was like, did they really already move on from Corum? No, they did not. Because Corum just didn't, he got hurt right when he was going to have a chance last year. I was wondering what was going to happen in that backfield. Hunter has barely even seen the field, even as a special teamer. So it's been interesting as far as that goes. We're going to talk wide receivers next, but first, quick note from our friends at Playoff Blitz. All right. So check this out. If you're like us and hate when your fantasy season ends before the real football gets good, you've got to try playoffblitz.com. It's fantasy football built for the NFL playoffs. No draft, no waivers, no sweat. Members just pick a lineup each week from the playoff teams. You can only use each player once. So once you start a player, you lose them. That's where the strategy kicks in. Remember, no need to hold a draft. Just create a league and invite your friends. Starting a league is super easy. It takes less than a minute, and you're all in from the wild card weekend to the Super Bowl. PlayoffBlitz.com is your home for fantasy playoff football. Leagues are $79, and you can invite as many people as you like. Run an office pool, invite league mates from your regular season leagues, or even your grandmother's bingo league. Join today at PlayoffBlitz.com, where fantasy football meets the Super Bowl. Enter promo code ROTOWIRE for a discount on your league today. Let's talk some wide receivers here. First of all, we've had a super chat that's been hanging around there for a while. I always like to hit these up. So let's do that right away as it's a wide receiver question. Digging a little deeper on this one here. Are you going to go Jalen Coker, Rashid Shaheed, or Shaheed, or versus Terry McLaurin or Carter? This is from Justin Vetter, 1754. So there's one running back in there as well. But
yeah, I'm going to go. I mean, I have sort of an irrational excitement about Michael Carter this week, coming off of 19 touch game where we know that he can handle the PPR volume out of the backfield, where Carter is capable of going for like a 5-6 catch game on top of all the carries he can handle. So I think I'm going Michael Carter over Terry McLaurin, which sounds a little bit crazy, but I think Carter ends up having a strong week. He was sort of the preferred waiver wire pickup for me. Again, we have Terry McLaurin ranked ahead of Carter. This is like my thing, not a fantasy points. The rankings have been completely locked in this year, but this is sort of I feel like the floor is safer with Carter this week. And there's a chance that just sort of everything falls apart for Washington this week against Philly. Philly hangs a number and sort of shuts them down. So I'm going with Carter there. Now, what was the other one? It was Coker versus Shaheed?
Yes.
I guess I'm going Jalen Coker in that one. That's a tough one. I mean, Shaheed's been trending up a little bit recently, but I like Jalen Coker. He's led Carolina in receiving yards in consecutive weeks. I think he's a little bit easier to trust this week. I think you've got to treat Coker, especially with and now if you factor in the McMillan injury, I think Coker has a stronger floor and maybe a higher ceiling here. Shaheed gives you a little bit more viability with you've got that variable with the return touchdowns potentially, but Coker, I think Coker ends up having a pretty strong rest of the season the way things are shaping up in Carolina.
Yeah, 2 matchups against the Bucs. You got to like that. Shaheed was one of the main reasons why, besides Jason Myers, why Seattle won last week. Shaheed had the big kickoff return on that last drive. They got him 2 more catches on that drive as well. It was nice to see him involved in the passing game. They've been kind of slowly working him in, but he got 7 targets last week. That's his highest number as a member of the Seahawks there. So So yeah, lot of interesting decisions there. I want to talk DK Metcalf next year, Theo, because it was a long slog for a while where they weren't hitting any downfield throws. The last 2 weeks, they've started getting a little bit more involved downfield. Not a huge volume on Monday night, but that's also because Miami was doing weird things in the second half of that game. But I love seeing Metcalf do what he can do, like big brothering all the defensive backs on Miami at once on that one touchdown. The week before, the deep plays against Baltimore. Big game coming up against Detroit. I think it's a sneaky, possibly high-scoring game, which you don't usually see from Pittsburgh. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think you've got to treat Metcalf in PPR leagues as somewhere in like that mid wide receiver 2 range, and he's got a little bit of upside. There's just a complete lack of pass catching options in Pittsburgh, which is part of the reason you've seen Kenneth Gainwell been so effective recently. He's been sort of the short and intermediate player, but Metcalf, the last 2 weeks have been decent. And I think that we're going to see Metcalf end the season well. We know Aaron Rodgers is going to go to him. And like you said, this is a Detroit team where if there's going to be a game that's going to pop off, it's indoors here in Detroit. You've also got the potential garbage time element. If Detroit can come up and sort of get a big lead here, Metcalf can do it in the second half. So you've got a lot of outs for DK Metcalf returning value where we've got him ranked. So I'm with you. I have confidence in him. I'm using him in a lineup or two this week. Mid-level wide receiver 2 with upside.
Yep. Stressy asks, he needs some help here with the flex option. DJ Moore, who I benched in the primetime over. I'm not even going to tell you. Well, I'll tell you. I started Alec Pierce over DJ Moore. I do not like the cone of shame, but but DJ Moore had one of his on weeks last week. He wants to either Moore, just Jaden Reed, BTJ, Debo, Troy Franklin, or even Goddard. Who are you plugging in here in this spot?
I mean, I think for me, it might be DJ Moore based on the fact that Luther Burden missed practice, Rome Odunze missed practice. It's a lack of pass-catching weapons. You also factor in Micah Parsons not there, so that defense gets to be a little bit easier to go against. BTJ's enticing because I do think that they're going to have to take some downfield shots, and I don't think he's going to get the Patrick Surtain shadow treatment in this game. So I think there's a chance that you end up getting BTJ over the top and he scores touchdowns in consecutive weeks. Goddard's been really running pure with the touchdown department, but I think I'm going to go DJ Moore. I think I'm rolling DJ Moore. That's the answer.
Right. I think so too. And I just want to talk Bears and Packers receivers generally, because we're seeing some Jaden Reed questions in the chat as well. Assuming Christian Watson doesn't play, and I know that's a big assumption because he was limited at practice today. Do you prefer Golden or Jaden Reed or Dubs?
Jaden Reed by a mile. I'm all about Jaden Reed here. Yeah, I love Jaden Reed. I think it's a really good spot for him. He had 5 catches for 55 yards last week. He's been trending up. They've been trying to get the ball in his hands. You've also got, I just called Josh Jacobs the Terminator, but if Josh Jacobs is a little bit limited this week, do we see Jaden Reed get used as a ball carrier? Maybe they give him 3 or 4 manufactured running plays, so you add that on top of it. I think Jaden Reed's trending up. And the thing about Jaden Reed is he's a player where you're sometimes like a little bit disappointed with how LaFleur uses him in terms of the snap share, in terms of the target volume. But you do know that he's a player that can put it on and put a huge spike week up. So again, if I'm chasing a ceiling outcome, it's definitely Jaden Reed in this one. I think Reed is trending up for the rest of the season and into the NFL playoffs.
Yeah. I want to manifest Golden happening because I saw, I can see the talent there. We saw those 2 catches late in the game against Denver, but I don't trust the volume. That's my problem.
Yeah, he's hard. It's hard for me to trust Matthew Golden as well. He's been it's been a disappointing outcome. Just thinking from a dynasty lens, he's lost some value here this year. And the fact that Christian Watson was able to come back and be so effective in that period of time, why we didn't necessarily see that from Golden. It's a little bit disappointing. It'll be interesting to see how the wide receiver hierarchy kind of falls next year for Green Bay heading into the offseason. There's also a chance that next year's wide receiver 1 is not on the team. They've made real efforts to sort of improve the wide receiver position. They might do it again this offseason. They drafted a couple last year. Why not go back to the well?
Yeah. I thought Watson was rapidly becoming that. That's why I was so disappointed to see that injury. So we'll see that. It'll be it's going to be interesting to see that both these teams operate in the offseason there, because I mean both teams are brewing to be really good for years. I'm really looking forward to just this continuing rivalry here. Should be a lot of fun. One more wide receiver I want to talk about. Hate to do it because it sucks. It sucks. This path has sucked. I'm somehow in the Scott Fishbowl semifinals despite using my first round pick on Justin Jefferson. And Sunday night was painful. Had the touchdown called back, had another pass in the end zone whistled through his hands. It's 3 straight weeks of really nothing production-wise. And yet I see the Giants as the opponent this week. I'm like, but what if it works for us this week?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just can't ever get to the point of benching a Justin Jefferson. Like you said, this is an opponent where it could all work out. It's incredibly disappointing stuff. We have him ranked as wide receiver 25 on the week, which is by far the lowest I've ever seen Justin Jefferson ranked since maybe like before his breakout performance in his rookie season. It's one of the most tilting things in fantasy to see Justin Jefferson not putting up fantasy points. That being said, you did have 2 touchdown scores go to Jalen Naylor last week. Yes. So certain things worked. Maybe they work this week with Justin Jefferson. Maybe it's a Ghost of Christmas Past type vibe, and we get Justin Jefferson coming out, putting up a 30-burger. For the haters out there who are going to put him on their benches, just to teach you a valuable fantasy lesson that you can bench studs, guys who are borderline studs, but it's really hard to bench your mega superstar studs like Justin Jefferson, especially against an opponent that doesn't scare you like a team like New York.
And especially when that player is not hurt. It's just, it would be one thing like at the beginning of the season when he missed training camp with the hamstring or something of that nature here. But this deep in the season, there's been no reports of any sort of injury. So that's even especially extra tilting. We're going to talk tight ends in a second. But first, got a quick note from Prosper Trading. Our friends over at Prosper Trading, I want to tell you, every weekend, millions bet on sports, hoping to beat the odds. But here's the truth. The house always wins. With trading, you're not betting. You're building. At Prosper Trading Academy, we give you the tools, the education, and the live guidance to actually create an edge. You can control your risk, compound your wins, and trade alongside real pros every single day. Stop gambling on games you can't control. Start trading the markets you can. Visit prospertrading.com/roto today and take your shot at real financial growth. That's prospertrading.com/ROTO. All right, let's talk tight ends. Theo, let's jump into Kyle Pitts. What do you expect for a reprise here?
I mean, if Drake London doesn't play, then I think Kyle Pitts is probably a top 3 tight end this week. And if he does play, I'm still probably putting Kyle Pitts as a top 6 tight end this week. Yep. Arizona can't defend anybody. The secondary's broken there in Arizona, and Kyle Pitts is coming off of a generational heater game with 3 touchdown grabs, had 12 targets in that game, 11 catches. Pitts has also been consistently good now the duration of the time that London missed. He's been a top 5 tight end for 3 straight weeks. He's scored at least 15 PPR points for 3 straight weeks. Everything's coming up Kyle Pitts right now, and Kyle Pitts is going to be a free agent this offseason. The timing couldn't be better. Pitts is putting up big numbers. He's still only 25 years old. I think he's going to end the year well. This is a game that we're chasing. We talked about it earlier. So, I mean, you've got to be one sicko to bench Kyle Pitts this week, or you got him on some incredible tight end roster. The guy was incredible last week. So, yeah, I'm absolutely enthusiastic about Kyle Pitts. I think he puts up another big number, and it gets another 15-plus point week.
I think it's funny that it took this year when everybody had almost given up on Pitts. He was going in double-digit rounds. I got a combination of Ferguson and Pitts in the FFC primetime, and I think those were rounds 10 and 12, 10 and 13, respectively, something around that nature.
You got tight end 2 and tight end 3 right now, right?
I know.
That's
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And if you timed it right, you really got it well because, Ferguson was the one dealing early in the season, especially when CD was out. By the way, Lamb missed practice today. Something to watch on that one there, but I don't think it's serious, but something to watch for.
I think it's a Veterans Day. It's Wednesday. It's Veterans Day. Let them sit.
Yep. But it was a perfect, usually you get whipsawed on these. This one, I got lucky and I timed it pretty well, but I'm rolling Pitts for sure. And I'm not really even thinking twice about it right now. Wanted to ask you the tight end pickup of the week. There's 2 of them this week, actually, that look like pretty decent streamers. Colby Parkinson, especially if Devontae Adams doesn't play and has had 6 touchdowns the last 6 weeks, or Darren Waller, who gets the Bengals? Who do you got?
I said Darren Waller on the School of Scott podcast because of the matchup. I think you could look at it like this. This is another floor versus ceiling discussion where I think Parkinson's floor is safer. We don't have any idea what's going to happen with Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers could be an upgrade in a short sample size over Tua, or Quinn Ewers could look like a guy who was drafted in the 6th round. I think that when you factor in, though, just how bad the Cincinnati defense is against opposing tight ends, the ceiling outcome is absolutely Waller, even though we don't know how the quarterback play is going to be. Then you factor in the game flow and the defense of Seattle versus Parkinson, but they're both really, really strong plays. I'm using each of them. I think you should treat each of them as top 10 tight ends. Parkinson, you probably rank higher, but Waller is still the higher outcome. So again, it comes down to if you have them both on your team, or if you can go scoop one up still, if your league's sort of asleep at the wheel, it comes down to your matchup.
Yep, I agree. Do you need to swing for the fences or not? Basically, there is the question. All right. We're going to riff through a little bit of Q&A on the way out the door here. Thank you, everybody who's been posting questions. We'll start off with El Nino Brown. Better running back pickup and start in a half-point PPR. Carter Estime with Devin Neal already ruled out. Thank you, New Orleans, for letting us know on Wednesday, by the way. I really do appreciate that. Or stash Emmanuel Wilson or McLaughlin in case of other injuries.
Carter easily for me.
Get Carter. Yep.
Yeah, I love Carter this week. I'm all about Michael Carter. I think he's the like a really strong spot start or bailout RB2 for a lot of people.
Jelly of the month. Current 3 wide receiver in flex: Olave, McMillan, and Juwan Jennings. Marks, Gainwell, and Rico PPR. If London plays, who sits?
Well, right now, Tetero McMillan might not play.
Right.
I think I would probably sit Tetero McMillan regardless here, because you have the target consolidation in San Francisco. Juwan Jennings coming off a 2-touchdown week. I'd roll with Olave. I'd roll with Juwan Jennings, and I'd roll with Drake London, and I would bench Tetero McMillan there. And then his second question was Marks, Gainwell, and Rico PPR.
I think those are all
together.
I think it's all together. Like any one of those 6 it sits. And
yeah, so if any one of those 6, it's still McMillan or Marks. One of the two probably misses the week.
I agree. By the way, Ricky Pearsall might not play, so I especially like Juwan Jennings this week. Something to also keep in mind as far as that goes. Thanks for the question there. Sean asks, half-point PPR, sit 1 for a flex. Tetero McMillan or Coker if he doesn't play, Devonta Smith or Jalen Warren. Is it McMillan again?
Yeah, it's probably McMillan again. This is a really tough one. I'm not that enthusiastic about any of these guys.
Right.
It's probably McMillan. Again, he's banged up. Probably sit the Carolina Panther wide receiver in this one.
All right. Thanks for the question there. We'll keep on rolling here. We already talked a little bit with about Rashee Rice and Jaden Reed. If Rice plays, Rice versus Jaden Reed.
Rashee Rice if he plays.
Yeah.
And I think Minshew's done a decent, like, I'll say that Scott Barrett, who I podcast with, is a little bit more enthusiastic about Minshew than a lot of people that I've talked to. But Minshew does have a tendency to like hone in on his top target historically.
Yes, he
so
does.
I think you go with Rashee Rice and just don't overthink it. Go with Rice. There's a chance it could be a little bit more tunnel vision. This offense for Kansas City, it's really been spiraling downhill. I get the idea that you want to pivot, but Rashee Rice should have very strong target volume if he plays.
All right. Steven asks, Troy Franklin, Wandale, or Jaden Reed? Need one.
That's a tough one. Troy Franklin, Wandale, or Jaden Reed. I made this big argument for Jaden Reed, but I think I'm going to go Wandale in this one. That's who we have ranked the highest right now. Again, versus Minnesota in New York, I like the sort of the PPR scam for Wandale to have a decent target volume week and to deliver this week. So I'm going to go with Wandale Robinson.
All right. Jeff, thanks for that question. Jeff Mullins asks, Jalen Warren or Kenneth Gainwell?
Gainwell.
Yeah,
Give me Gainwell. Gainwell's got the PPR scam going. He's had at least 6 catches in 4 out of his last 5 games. He's been an RB1 in 4 out of his last 5 games. Now, that's PPR. But again, in half-point PPR, we're only docking him a little bit there.
Yep.
And we talk about the game flow for the Detroit game. It's a game where Pittsburgh is going to have to put some points up if they want to win. Plus, we have garbage time factoring in potentially in the second half. There's a lot of reasons to like Gainwell in this one. Gainwell's just getting the targets that Warren's not getting. I think a lot of the argument with Warren, the pro-Warren argument this past summer, is actually proved to be a Gainwell argument. It's Warren's going to catch all these dump-offs from Aaron Rodgers. Warren's going to be this PPR guy, but it's actually been Gainwell. Gainwell's been terrific this year.
He's been awesome. I used him in primetime last week as my flex over David Montgomery, and I'm thankful I did. At first I had it
19 points. You feeling good about that?
Yes, I am. All right, let's move on to Story Shade. As Tyler Warren or Colby Parkinson? This is an interesting question because of what happens with Philip Old Man Rivers at quarterback versus Parkinson, everybody's trendy guy to pick up this week.
Give me Colby Parkinson in this one. I'll go Parkinson over Tyler Warren. Again, the game flow could get there for. I think that the main sort of game plan for Indianapolis is going to be as much Jonathan Taylor as humanly possible against the San Francisco defense. I don't think it bodes necessarily well to being a Tyler Warren game. That being said, I get it. If you have him, he's still probably somewhere like a low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 range. But I'm going to go with Colby Parkinson, who I think is a mid-level tight end 1 this week. Parkinson should also absorb. He's already getting it, but those targets near the goal line in the red zone, with no Davante Adams, makes Parkinson just much more enticing.
I agree, and I don't think Adams plays. By the way,
no, I know they're saying that he could, but it would be insane, a team with Super Bowl aspirations, not to let your 32-year-old wide receiver heal up, even though the game is incredibly high magnitude, incredibly important game. Also factor in it's a short week to have him turn around for a third. I mean, everything about it would be insane. And McVay, I think eventually the Rams do the right thing, and they, better for worse, win or lose, they have a big picture decision to make here, and the big picture decision is to get Davante Adams to rest. I don't think Davante Adams plays another snap during the regular season, let alone plays this week.
Yeah, I think there's some gamesmanship by McVay here too, just trying to give Seattle something to think about a little bit by saying we're doing everything to get him back. But I think that yesterday was the only day that the Rams were having on-field practice for this week, and he wasn't there. So to me, that says a lot. Master J says, if you guys need this W, pick 4 players for a full PPR league, 2 running back, 2 flex spots among Pittman, Debo, Khalil Shakir, Adonai Mitchell, Tyrone Tracy, Judkins, Hampton, Carter, Parkinson. So let's hit the running backs first. Tracy, Judkins, Hampton, Carter. Pick 2.
Okay, Tracy, Judkins, Hampton, Carter. I think I'm going to roll with Omari and Hampton here. I like the idea of the Dallas game sort of lending itself to like positive game flow. I know he's ranked a little bit lower for some, but I like Omari and Hampton sort of get things going against Dallas. And then the other ones were Carter and who else?
Carter, Judkins, and Tyrone Tracy. So we need one more running back.
Man, it's hard to bench Tyrone Tracy coming off of that strong 2-touchdown performance. I think I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins here, though. We talked about the quality of the matchup against Buffalo. That's a tough one. And then the 2 flex spots here. Give me... Oh, so I can use additional running backs in the flex here.
Yes.
If I'm reading this correctly. Okay. So I'm probably going to roll with Debo. I think the usage will be strong against Philadelphia. I think they're going to have to use him. Sort of Debo in sort of some of the Zach Ertz type targets, and Debo also getting his own target share. If Washington's going to try to keep it close with Philly, they've got to use Debo there. So I'll roll with Debo in a flex spot. And then, man, I made a lot of arguments for Carter and Parkinson. I'm going to rule out Shakir. I'm going to rule out Trace. I'm going to rule out Shakir. I'm going to rule out Michael Pittman. Adonai Mitchell, I like him, but that's tough.
Yeah.
Man, too. Jeff, bail me out here. So I'm sort of between Carter, Parkinson, and Tracy on this one.
I'm going to go Tracy. I just trust the volume.
Okay, there we go.
I think as my buddy Jim Coventry always says, volume is king. I think that's the case here. And I think that makes it an easier question that way.
Jim Coventry is not loving the Jamison Williams explosion recently, I bet.
I imagine.
I gotta follow up with him on that one. But Jim is one of the sharpest guys out there. Big shout out to Jim Coventry. He's come on a number of my shows. Real ball knower.
Yes.
Shout out to Alan Sislowski. You guys got the team over there at RotoWire.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. My buddy Wayland's also is kicking some serious butt this year too. Let's go with TG here to finish up here. Would you start? Would you start more? I'm sorry. Let me read this closely. The those part is throwing me here. More Goddard, Parkinson, Reed, Loveland over Rice and Pickens. I'm not benching Pickens. I know it's been terrible with George Pickens the last 2 weeks. I can't bench him.
The target share has been low for Pickens recently. It's really, really gone downhill over the last 2 weeks, and it's been sort of affecting the bottom line stats. I still would have him ranked higher than DJ Moore, than Jaden Reed, and certainly over the tight ends. Rashee Rice I'm using as well. So yeah, it's one of those conundrums where you like the potential usage, you like the potential matchup for some of those guys listed, but Pickens got you here. He was giving you top 5 wide receiver scoring for most of the year. A lot of times when we see big-time scorers go through lulls, they'll end up bouncing back and having a big spike week. I would hate to galaxy brain it and bench George Pickens in a potential game that could shoot out against LA. So I'm going to go with Pickens, and I've already made the argument for Rice. I think Minshew locks in on him. I think he sees 10 targets if he plays.
All right. I lied. We got one more question on the way out in here, and I apologize for the lying, but we got a super chat. So Michael Carter, Kenneth Walker, or Audric Estime, standard league. This has got to be Carter still, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's Carter. I can't trust Kenneth Walker. I realize that there's always sort of a candle burning for Kenneth Walker, and people want to see it, but last week was terrible. Estime is an interesting one, because we saw Devin Neal give you really strong usage in that role, and Estime getting those targets at the end of the game. That being said, I mean, we're kind of really down bad if we're using Audric Estime this week.
The Jets,
I would go.
though.
It's a very good.
Jets.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think I'm still rolling with Michael Carter though. I made a lot of arguments for him. I'm going to stick with it.
I was just kind of playing advocate there. I'm with you. I take Carter too, but
there we go.
I will say it might be manna from heaven if you're hurting at running back this week. We actually have Carter and Estime kind of rolling and is completely available in leagues.
Yeah, Jawar Jordan too.
Yes.
We have to pay attention to Woody Marks, but Jawar Jordan was really good last week and gets the Raiders this week. Yeah. And that's a functional offense in Houston. I understand there's sort of the threat of Dari Ogunbowale, but you could easily see Jawar Jordan giving you 80-plus rushing yards, maybe finds the end zone once again. So we'll keep an eye on what's going on with Woody Marks. It's a really fun week for dart throw running backs for sure, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Some weeks you get nothing. You get nothing at all. You're hoping, like, there was a league where I started Malik Davis a couple of weeks ago. I started on the wrong week. I got whipsawed it, but it was just, everybody was hurt or on bye. At least we don't have the bye weeks anymore, but this time of year, you get that. You get some weird names that pop up and actually have good games. So hopefully you get one of those and they work for you if you need it. Everybody, thanks for all the questions. Theo, thank you. This was super fun. An hour flew by. And you appreciate all your patience with all these questions as well. Everybody wants those questions answered in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Always love chopping it up for sure. And shout out to your audience. Really appreciate all those questions as well.
All right. Well, check out Theo over at Fantasy Points. And of course, check him out on Twitter. You can find out everything from there. You can see all of his podcasts. Check out all of his copious podcasts because, let's face it, that's great work there. It's a labor of love. You got the good audio set up there. Always like that. We'll do this again sometime soon. Thanks for coming on. Good luck in your playoffs.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to look to run pure this week, Jeff, both of us.
All right. Let's go. Let's go team 4 in the prime time there. Let's go. That's Theo Gremminger, DOG Fantasy on Twitter. Thanks everybody for listening. Good luck in your fantasy playoffs. We'll talk to you again next week.